RCMP members have been left reeling by the death of one of their own. Constable Shaylin Yang of the Burnaby Detachment was killed in the line of duty on Tuesday. Retired RCMP officer Surrey South MLA Eleanor Sturco spoke about the weight of the tragedy in question period.
When a police officer decides to don their uniform and take on the responsibility of protecting the public, that they do not bear this responsibility alone. Their families also carry the weight of that decision. The weight of that decision is often measured in fear. Fear that their loved one will not come home. We thank Constable Yang for her service, and we will continue to remember her not only today, but as we move forward with our duty in this House to address public safety.
Katie Kamkar is a clinical psychologist who specializes in workplace stress and trauma for law enforcement, and she is joining us now. Thank you so much for your time today. I believe we're having trouble hearing you there, but I'm going to assume.
Thank you so much.
There we go. All right. Now, as you just heard there in that clip, Constable Yang's death has left an entire community of law enforcement officers and, of course, their families as well grieving. What do you often hear from officers after they lose a fellow member or if they encounter a situation like this?
Yes, and thank you so much for covering that very important topic. It is devastating. There is tremendous sadness involved, devastation, fear, and obviously grief. We have heard here of a series of our police officers dying in line of duty. Just in September, we have heard of our Toronto police officer, Constable Hong, who just was shot while just wanting to buy coffee. During the break time, not only for himself, but then also for the trainings, as he was also a teacher and mentor. And today event, we have funeral for our South Simcoe police officers. And of course, we have heard of the tragic death of our RCMP officer. So what we need to remember is we're talking about a human being behind a badge. This is a career and occupation that is inherent exposure to trauma, and it is accumulation of the traumatic event. So it's either directly experiencing the traumatic event, witnessing the traumatic event, and of course the repeated exposure to aversive details of the traumatic incidents.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I imagine the psychological impact, it's not just something that's being felt now, it continues. And officers, I imagine, could be re-traumatized every time something like this happens. What are some of the coping strategies that you recommend, and what do you hear from officers that are having a difficult time?
Absolutely. The psychological impact is likely every single day. But we do know that with accumulation of traumatic events compounded by other stressors, psychosocial stressors, especially it could be this lack of sleep, or a lot of maybe other stressors, organizational stressors, operational stressors, what might go through, it can just contribute to a weakening of the immune system, increasing the vulnerability, and of course increasing the risk for now we often hear burnout and psychological risk concerns and physical health problems. So we often hear of different types of anxiety disorders, depression, and of course symptoms of post-traumatic stress. We have gone a long way in terms of very much reducing the stigma. In the past several years, we have noticed an improvement in the reduction of stigma when we talk about personal stigma, the self-stigma, workplace stigma. There are now more resources, and of course changing everyone's attitude and normalizing any normal reactions that we can develop following traumatic events, and the importance of talking, identifying range of thoughts, identifying a range of emotions, and the seeking support, peer support, talking with our colleagues, talking with our close family and friends, and of course reaching out for professional help whenever needed. So the earlier on, from a preventative measures, early intervention, it becomes very important. But as we know continuously throughout research, quality support network is very important. And accessing resource, we do know now organizations, in addition to provinces and nationally, we have really built more and more resources. Of course, this is all an area that we do need significant improvement. It's an ongoing progress, but definitely there is a progress.
All right, so as I'm hearing from you then, for family members and friends of law enforcement officers, because it really is an entire community, that if they notice their loved ones struggling, that they should recommend that they speak to someone professionally and seek some guidance?
No one is alone, absolutely, especially when we feel that the symptoms might even worsen over time or interfere with our functioning. I even have sometimes people call me and say, I'm not sure, do I have something or not? Maybe I think I'm fine, but I just want to learn skills for coping, proactive coping, resiliency, emotional resilience, self-efficacy. So there are a variety of very supportive, proactive, positive coping strategies that can become very helpful. We also have very great resources now that we have developed. So, for example, there is CIPSR, the Canadian Institute for Public Safety Research and Treatment. People can have access to diverse range of resources. I also have the chance to work with the Ministry of Solicitor General here within our province. There is the Mental Health Collaborative Table. And right now, if people go to ontario.ca, mental health resources for our first responders, public safety personnel, for our police, a lot of great resources, so not only for Ontario, but also nationally as well, for our first responders, police, including families, but also for general population as well. So the more, again, we can share those information, build awareness and normalizing it, again, we have a human being behind the badge.
Absolutely. That is Katie Kamkar joining us today. Katie, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you again for having me.